Part of this video is sponsored by Löwenanteil. This is good old goulash, a true classic originating from Hungary, but beloved across Austria, Germany, and many parts of neighboring Europe. And as much as I love a good goulash, I have to say the side dish we're making today, called Serviettenknödel, is equally amazing. Honestly, it might be my favorite way to turn stale bread into culinary gold. Trust me, it is incredible. Now, the recipe I'm about to show you is very solid, I hope, but I'm calling it preliminary today, and that is for a reason. You see, when researching goulash recipes, I noticed there are dozens, countless variations. Everyone's grandmother seems to have their own special twist, and there's no clear one true recipe. So with so many variations, here's what I decided to do. I'm gonna crowdsource some cooking wisdom from you guys. Here's how we're gonna do it. I'll share my preliminary goulash recipe in full detail now, and if you've got suggestions or experience with this dish, please comment below, because once we've gathered all of your tips, I'll combine them into one ultimate perfect follow-up goulash recipe in the future. I hope that sounds good, so without further ado, let's get cooking with my current version. We're gonna start this dish off with some onions, and by some I mean a lot, because they'll form the base of this goulash and bind everything together. The easiest way to slice these onions evenly is definitely using a mandolin. Trust me, you really want these slices thin and uniform, and while using a knife is possible, a mandolin slicer is your best friend here for sure. I left the onion root attached and trimmed just the top off, and used that flat surface to safely slice it into rings along the orbital axis of the onion. Doing this will give you these super fine, beautiful rings. Perfect. Now, to a large pot, we're gonna melt in a little bit of butter and then transfer all of our onions in there. Once your onions are in, toss in a pinch of sugar and a little salt. This isn't mainly for seasoning. Both ingredients help pull out moisture from the onions, making them caramelize faster. Caramelizing onions does take a while, so make sure to give them a good stir regularly. You know the drill. Don't forget to stir your onions. It'll probably take around 10 to 15 minutes for them to get some color, and we're aiming for a state that's not actually fully caramelized, just lightly golden or semi-caramelized, let's call it that. That's perfectly fine because they're gonna cook for quite a long time later anyway. Next, we're gonna deglaze the pan with just a bit of red wine, not too much because red wine can quickly overpower the whole dish, just enough to add some depth. And I'm also adding a small amount of tomato paste, which will add an extra sweet, tangy umami touch. Now, a truly essential goulash ingredient is paprika powder. We're gonna be generous here because this is absolutely the soul of goulash as a dish. I'm also adding caraway seeds, which is an underrated spice that is absolutely key to getting that old school goulash flavor, if you ask me. Now, when it comes to herbs, recipes are all over the place, so rather than stressing out too much, I'm just gonna add about a tablespoon of mixed dried herbs and a single bay leaf for extra depth. Then for a slightly unconventional but highly recommended move, I'm tossing in a smoked German sausage. This is a Met sausage, if you remember my video on that, but many Polish sausages would also work equally well, adding a wonderful smoky cured meat note. Just slice it into little chunks and add it to the pot. Definitely not traditional, but definitely delicious. Now mix all these ingredients thoroughly until you've formed this thick aromatic paste. Now let's finally talk about meat. I'm using large hearty slices of beef leg with plenty of connective tissue. That connective tissue is key because as it cooks low and slow, it's gonna break down, giving a rich gelatinous texture. Plus, these pieces actually include marrow bones, which will add even more depth and richness to the broth. Interestingly enough, in classic goulash recipes, the meat isn't browned beforehand, so we're just gonna add these chunks straight into the pot. Pour in some water, just enough to fully cover the meat, and stir roughly to incorporate our flavorful paste into the liquid. Now listen closely because this part is key. Everything has got to simmer very, very gently. If you boil it vigorously, your meat will toughen up, and that's the last thing we want. So keep the heat low, cover the pot, and let it simmer very gently. Low and slow is the secret. 2 to 3 hours minimum, but longer is even better. Now, while that's simmering, let's turn stale bread into culinary gold. I'm talking about German Serviettenknödel. This is one of German cuisine's best kept secrets, a delicious bread dumpling. But before we jump into that, in case you don't always have time to spend a few hours cooking a recipe, here's a message from this video's sponsor, Löwenanteil. You guys would think that running a food channel on YouTube means I always have great healthy meals available, but the truth is I don't. Most days I'm actually scripting, organizing, editing my videos, and guess what? Getting a balanced lunch can be quite the struggle. But not anymore, thanks to Löwenanteil. They specialize in making healthy, protein-rich meals that are ready to eat in like 3 minutes. They come in these sturdy glass jars, are made with organic, bio-certified ingredients, and you can choose from a ton of different flavors. Some are vegan friendly, others have high quality meat like this chipotle chili with beef that I could eat like every day. Tons of protein, tons of fiber, and no matter if you choose to reheat them in a pan or your microwave, I guarantee it won't get any easier. This is a meal that doesn't just taste great and hit my nutrition goals, it also keeps me feeling full and feeling great for at least a couple of hours. You can currently order Löwenanteil in the major German-speaking countries, so if that's where you're from, I can only recommend checking out Löwenanteil. And if you do, make sure to use my code Andong to get 10% off. I've been enjoying their meals for a long time before they even reached out to me for a sponsorship, and it has changed my lunch breaks forever. Convenient meals and healthy meals are finally not a contradiction anymore. Check out the link in the video description below, and thank you Löwenanteil for sponsoring this video. Alright, now back to our delicious bread dumplings, and here's how you make them. Start with any simple white bread. Stale is good, but if it's fresh, that's also doable. First, dice your bread into cubes, not too small, that is the key, and you will see why later. We're gonna add everything to a tray, and if you have some crumbs, definitely don't waste them, just add those as well. Spread everything out evenly. We're gonna dry it further in a medium-low oven for about 10 minutes until they're just pale golden, a little like this. Now while they're cooling down, let's make a seasoned milk. Melt a little butter in a saucepan, then add half an onion, diced very finely. Let that gently caramelize to develop a nice browned butter flavor. And once aromatic, add a small handful of finely chopped parsley, then some milk, and just a tiny pinch of nutmeg. Remember, nutmeg is very powerful, so just a little goes a long way. Season with salt and pepper, turn off the heat, and let this infuse briefly. Next, place your dried bread cubes into a big bowl and pour your warm, seasoned milk mixture right over them. Mix well so the bread absorbs everything, and once combined, crack an egg into the mixture. It acts as a binder and a little bit like glue, so mix thoroughly again and let everything rest for 15 to 20 minutes, giving the bread enough time to fully soak up all that moisture. Now, here comes the unusual part if you haven't seen that before. Bring a large pot of water to a gentle simmer, and while that's heating up, take a clean kitchen towel. It's gotta be clean. My mom specifically asked me to use a clean one for the video, so hi mom. Dunk that quickly into the water and wring it out so it's just damp, not soaking wet. Now, spread it flat on your counter and transfer your bread mixture onto this damp towel. Form it into a nice even log shape and then roll it up tightly like you're making a burrito. Try to get that filling as evenly distributed and your sausage as taut as possible. Twist and secure both ends with kitchen twine, or if you don't have that handy, rubber bands or even plastic wrap will do. Now gently lower your dumpling roll into the simmering water. It's important it doesn't touch the bottom of the pot, so just let it float above that a little bit. Then cover the pot with a lid and gently simmer. Remember, simmer. Never boil, that is key, for around 20 minutes. When it's done, carefully remove and unwrap your dumpling log, setting it aside to cool slightly on a wire rack. This cooling helps to form a thin outer crust. Now by this point, a couple of hours have passed here at the studio and your goulash should be ready to go. So carefully remove the meat pieces from the broth temporarily, then add a few slices of lemon for that kind of zingy freshness, and over high heat, let the sauce reduce to thicken slightly. Yes, we can finally turn the heat up because the meat is out. Now in the meantime, separate the meat from the bones. Don't miss that delicious marrow, so satisfying. These, by the way, should separate nicely after all those hours. And now from the pot, remove the lemon slices and bay leaf, then add the chunks of meat back into your reduced flavorful sauce. Now you can season it with salt and pepper to taste, which I forgot to film, sorry. Then turn off the heat because we're entering the final stretch. And for that, let's finish up that bread dumpling roll, which has been cooling down and steaming away by itself. Now slice it into thick, generous pieces, revealing a fluffy, delicious cross-section. They're fantastic as they are. You can eat them just like that, but trust me, pan-searing each slice briefly in some browned butter takes them to the next level. Crispy on the outside, super tender on the inside and just absolutely delicious. Now to serve, grab a nice plate, ladle on a generous dollop of rich hearty goulash and arrange a few slices of our beautifully golden Serviettenknödel on the side. Sprinkle with chopped parsley, and for a super controversial one, I like adding some cold preserved lingonberries. That sweet, tangy, and cold accent really cuts through everything so nicely, and guys, just like that, you've created a plate of the ultimate Middle European comfort food. Now let's make a perfect bite with a bit of everything. Yes, rich sauce, tender meat, crisp buttery dumplings, a little bit of those lingonberries, of course. And guys, this tastes truly incredible. And you know, even though this did come out delicious, I'm generally quite happy. I feel there's definitely still room for improvement, and that is where you guys come in. Honestly, I'm a little bit puzzled why the meat wasn't quite as tender as I'd hoped. Maybe it was just a specific cut of meat that I got that particular day, because I was expecting like almost shredded meat, like a pull-apart texture, and I cooked everything for 4 to 5 hours total, so that's where I should have landed, but unfortunately I didn't. So I feel like there must be a better cut of meat than what I used. If you know which one that is, please let me know below. I'm looking for that info. And while we're at it, I'm also curious about your thoughts on the sauce consistency. Now, I know thickening goulash with cornstarch isn't traditional, but I'm actually tempted to try it next time because I was missing that super velvety smooth texture. When it comes to flavor, I actually thought that was really, really good. It could have used a little more like umami depth, maybe just some MSG, honestly. But if you have any family secrets you're willing to share, now is a great time. So yeah, how do you think I did? If you've got any ideas or tips for taking my goulash recipe to the next level, because it's definitely a work in progress, please leave them in the comments below. Let's crowdsource the best ideas and tricks, and I'll follow up to this video in the future. Thank you guys for watching, and I'm gonna see you in the next one.